Make every night a wonderful journey, no matter where you are. Good night, sweet dreams. The first story, The Gun Game. The loud bang on her front door jolted Clara from her daydream. This was it after all the careful planning and struggling to survive. The end would come now. 9 blocks up in room 934 of the now abandoned Marriott. She started to cry, not for herself, but for her little 3-year-old son. Jeremy was the world to her, and she couldn't bear to think of his short life ended. Not like this. Open the door. She recognized the voice of her living boyfriend of 4 years, Jerome, quickly slipping off the guard chain. She opened the door and let him in. I don't have much time. The boys are going to pick out what's left of the pathmark, and I want to be first in line. He suddenly stopped. Damn, baby. You smell good. What is that? It's called Lovely by Sarah Jessica Parker, she said simply. I found it next to the mini bar. Only the best, right? Yeah, he said as he left the backpacks next to the door and turned to leave. I'll be back soon. Keep the door locked, okay? Jerome was a survivor, while everyone else was scrounging for supplies downtown. He had had the bright idea to take his little family to the local Marriott to wait it all out. No one is coming for us. They've given up on the major cities. He had said simply. The plan was to just let everyone kill each other while they lived the high life. Stories up in the now abandoned hotel it had worked. Most of what was left of humanity and the creatures they became had pretty much wiped each other out. Not that it hadn't been a tough few months. The power was now out and they were down to good, but they were still alive. Clara dragged the 2 bags to the kitchen area and pulled out the dented cans. From the bedroom, she heard Jeremy waking up. A few minutes later, he came into the main living area. Mommy, look, I've got a gun shooter. His excited eyes locked onto hers and she sighed. He was holding some kind of plastic handle. He had obviously broken off one of the cabinets. He pointed it at her. Bang, bang, bang. It reminded her of the awful gang violence just a week prior. Both Jerome's crew and some Asian gang had had a disagreement over who owned what's left of a number of grocery stores that had ended with a few of their good friends dead. She didn't show it. Let me see, honey, she said. Holding her hand out, he turned and ran into the bedroom. That was the annoying thing about the age. They never did what you asked. She quickly ran after him and pulled it out of his hand. She was now extremely careful not to let him have anything he could hurt himself with. It was safe enough other than the next 2 hours of constant noise. There was no harm in letting him run around with it. Mommy, can we play that gun game again, Mommy? Look at me. Mommy, can we play that gun shooter game again? Mommy, I want to play the gun game, Mommy. Yes, we can play that game again. She hated that game every time she played it. It reminded her of the last couple of months and the last hours of the city's death. Both sides had come out of hiding and shot it out. It was unsettling enough to be on the outskirts of a war zone. What made it absolutely unbearable was knowing that one side of the conflict was composed of the Walking Dead. They had made it as far as the Hotel Jerome and his gang, as well as some of the other groups, and held them off just over by 5th Street. Well within view of the 9th floor Marriott, they had been content to put bullets into their enemies and move on. Conversely, when one of those things shot a human, they usually ended up carrying them off and eating them. Humans were fighting for survival. They were hunting for food. She had seen it firsthand. A couple of Asian thugs had been cautiously scouting between 5th and Broadway, and the enemy descended upon them with a plan that was both aggressive and cunning. These were not the meandering, shuffling corpses you saw in the movies. The enemy was very much intelligent, and they were still out there. She had only run into one of them once Jerome had given her a handgun of a dead police officer and told her, "Just point and squeeze." To be honest, he had taken care of things so well she didn't think she'd actually have to do any shooting herself. But a day ago, in the hotel, one of them had slipped by the patrols and gotten in the building she and Jeremy had gone to get, as the power had still been working then when she heard the slightest shuffle of feet around the corner. She knew where it wasn't what it wanted. She could smell the rotting flesh. Something inside her, some force of survival, helped her know exactly what to do. The primal, maternal instinct within her guided her against this awful predator. Heart racing, she moved with her son past the corridor where she knew it lurked. She even continued the casual small talk with her little boy, slowly slipping her and into her pockets where the 45 was located. She knew that once she and Jeremy were past the corridor, the thing would slip out of its hiding place and follow them, hoping for a clear shot once past the corner. She turned on her heel, pulled out the gun, rounded the corner and just started firing. She was right, not only had the thing come out of hiding, but it had moved at a quick pace during the 2 seconds it took her to spin on her heel and draw her weapon. The thing was already within reaching distance for shots to the body and to the head that was still advancing upon her. She could still remember the expression of surprise and fear on its face just before its entire head popped, the grey matter spilling everywhere behind it. He had expected to see some expression of an undead creature, twisted in hatred and loathing the terrifying thing. Was that, aside from the rotten smell and blackened appendages, its face still looked human? Not waiting to see if there were more of them, she grabbed her son and bolted for room 934. She frantically reached into her pocket for the hotel room keycard, cutting her hand on the various survival items in her pocket. She swiped it over and over on the door key, desperate for the green signal that would indicate the lock would give. Finally it did, and she grabbed her son again and shoved him inside, rather than be traumatized by the whole event. Jeremy's little mind instead translated it into a game. The gun shooter game. His 3-year-old psyche interpreted the event as some elaborate fantasy, one that he wanted to repeat. It was odd the way that a child's mind translated near death. Now, Clara had to relive the entire incident over and over again in order to maintain the facade that the two of them had not escaped certain death yesterday. Bang bang. I got you, Mommy, in the head. I shot you. You're dead, you raid-ed mommy. Fall down, fall down. She had humored him enough, and she couldn't take the reality of the previous day's horror anymore. I don't want to play anymore, sweetie. Go eat your dinner. She was surprised when he obeyed. Sitting at the kitchen table, she watched as Jeremy ate the food she had made for him. Since yesterday, she had had trouble eating. She would put food in her mouth, think about the great pieces of brain splattered all over the adjacent corridor, and vomit, but whatever it was about watching hers, and gobble up the last pieces of consquash and mashed carrots seemed to finally convince her appetite to surface. In fact, she was really hungry. She leaned in towards him to kiss him on the cheek, her maternal instincts kicking in again despite the nausea. Sometimes a mother just has to reach over, grab her child close and kiss him over and over, especially considering recent events. She nuzzled her lips against his cute baby fat cheeks and rubbed her nose into him. Something was wrong. She felt an unusual, insatiable desire to bite his flesh, His soft, supple baby fat called out to her aching stomach and demanded union. She stood up quickly. "No," she whispered, "please, God. No." She ripped off the bandages and looked down at her wounded hand. The blood vessels, next to the blackened incision, had ever so slightly blackened up her vein like a mild case of tetanus. What had she clapped her hand on again? Jeremy sat next to the kitchen table, mindlessly muttering the gibberish of a 3-year-old and coloring outside the lines of his favorite dinosaur book. She watched him for a moment, knowing that if she did not act quickly, her maternal instincts would be overcome by her insatiable hunger. Of course, she could just give in, if whatever was inside her, and it did Jeremy what it had done to her. Her indecision was broken by her son's innocent inquiry. "Mommy, let's play the gun game again." "Okay, sweetie." The second story, Night Terrors. As a child, I had horrid dreams of the fire that took the life of my parents. My adoptive mother would always calm me down back to a light sleep, and I would have no memory of it the next morning. As I grew older, I realized that the night terrors weren't as frequent as they used to be when I was younger. In fact, by the time I was 17, I couldn't remember the last time I did have an attack. I had a somewhat normal life. Nothing unusual eventually. After I finished college, I moved from my small-town home of South Bend and traveled to Seattle. That was where I met Daniel, my husband. After about a year of being there, we figured that going back to South Bend would be a lovely idea. At the time, I was almost a month and a half pregnant with our first child, and we thought that living in a small town would be best for him or her. For the first 2 weeks of house hunting, we lived with my adoptive mother. Her husband recently passed away of lung cancer. I noticed that the old house I used to live in was reconstructed. It was as if there was never a fire to begin with Daniel, that it would be a great idea to live there, considering that he'd be close to his new job, and there were great schools nearby. After a few weeks of planning and getting the paperwork finished, we had owned my old home. Life continued. We had our child. We named her Angel, my mother's name Alex, and her female version of my father's name. 7 years later, Angela was on summer break and Daniel's job was anything but boring. Eventually he began traveling all over the world. He'd bring back little toys for Angela, and clothing and jewelry for me. Needless to say though, he was gone often, and that didn't work out too well when Angela began having night terrors. It was so odd that she began having them. What was even more disturbing was that they were constantly afire. She cried in the dead of the night. I rushed to her room. "Angie, what's the matter?" She only wept in my arms, wanting Daddy and Mommy. After a few more minutes of her crying, I had calmed her down, but this time I kept her up. She sat across from me at the dinner table, drinking her hot chocolate. "Sweetie, what did you dream about?" She took one more gulp and answered, "Aim and a woman. You looked a lot like the woman, only her hair was darker." I felt my stomach twist. I had always been told that I looked like my mother with lighter hair, but there were no pictures of them around, and Julie only knew their names. I hadn't even told her that they died in a fire. "What was happening?" I asked. She bit her lip. "They were on fire, screaming, saying, 'Get Haven out.'" I sighed. "That was what my uncle told me they said before they died." I sent Angel to bed and called Daniel, which it was nearly noon for him, and explained everything that happened. I called a doctor, and he said that there was nothing out of the ordinary with Angela, that it was all just a very bad dream eventually. I had no leads, and neither had Daniel for a while. The night terror stopped, and we lived peaceful once again. But the first time we attended church, the priest looked at me funny at the end of the sermon. He pulled me aside and said that my daughter was having horrid dreams. I nodded, but before I asked him how he knew, he had a look of great alarm on his face. Get her out, and if you can, get out. Leave all possessions behind but the essentials, but please get out. I was confused, but I thought logically, maybe he was hinted that some gangsters were gonna set the house on fire. I came up with a good idea to go visit my adoptive mother for a week. I took all of the clothes that would last a week, and even our dog. The next day, we awoke to strange news that our house was burned to the ground. What was even more odd was that it burned down the exact way it did 25 years ago, down to the very last ash. The third story, the mouth of truth, somewhere near the center of Palermo, in Sicily, there is an old amusement park. Should you wander around, just aside a shooting gallery, there is an old funny-looking statue of a grotesque face. Don't try to get close to it yet, and as soon as you're about to touch it, no matter how hard you try, you'll change your mind. Go to the shooting gallery and pay the clerk for 3 games. It will cost you the equivalent of $10. In total, it doesn't matter how much you score. As soon as you finish the second game, keep the gun and don't shoot again. The clerk will ask you for his gun back, but you must ask to try the mouth of truth instead. After he agrees, you'll be able to approach the statue. Put your hand in his mouth up to your wrist. A small crowd will gather around you. After some seconds, the eyes will lighten, your hand will be blocked, as the statue will ask you one question about a secret or embarrassing fact of your life, even something you're ashamed of. You must answer the question truthfully and aloud, regardless of the people watching you. If you answer correctly, some will be shocked, others amused by the truth, and your hand will be released. Within the following 2 or 3 weeks, you will feel somewhat different. You will see that same light of the statue in your own eyes, and you'll notice people will feel a bit uneasy when talking to you. That will be for a simple reason. None will be able to lie to you. The effect of this blessing will last about a year. After it has worn out, you'll be able to redo this once again. Don't answer the statue with a lie. An inner mechanism will clamp your fingers, and you'll pass out from the shock. When you wake up, you'll be just outside of the park, and you won't be able to enter it ever again when you go back home. The morning afterwards, you'll feel something strange in the hand you put in the statue's mouth, and find out your pinky is missing. There will be no cuts or wounds, just smooth flesh where your finger used to be. Throughout the following days, each morning you'll wake up with one of your fingers gone. On the 11th to 20th morning, your toes will start missing. Should you try to ask for help, people will just laugh at you and tell you've always been a liar. By a month, you have no appendages, no nose, ears, eyes, lips, genitals. All you'll be able to is feel around with your stumpy limbs. Then your limbs will disappear to you. I'll be left wherever you fell asleep as a human stump until starvation and decay get the better of you. If you answer truly, but keep your voice low, from that moment on for the rest of your life you'll just be a big liar. Anytime you try to tell the truth, your voice will be cut, and only a slight hissing sound will come out.